July 26, 2023. Would the secretary please call the roll?
Got it. Greg?
Here. Claire?
Here.
Gus?
Here.
Nice. Ann?
Here.
Kimberly? Not here. I'm
All
here.
right.
And Dan?
Here.
Okay.
Okay, Gus made it in on time. We begin with reports from Board of Supervisors and other government officials.
Wait, can I just say something real quick before we do that? We're tied 1-1 in the 71st.
Would you be quiet?
Like-
The game, I'm gonna watch it at home later, all right? So don't,
I was just saying.
I don't wanna know anything
I can't
about
be
it.
responsible for what comes out of my mouth.
don't want to
That
know,
changes
I do
anytime.
not know anything you've said. It's being recorded. You're ruining the drama. Okay, so now, could we begin? Anything, Mike, you want to report? Okay, please, Mike.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Mike O'Neill. I work for Supervisor Ray Mueller, and I work out of the Coast Side office there over at the shops at the Harbor Shops. So we've got some issues here, things to talk about. The county of San Mateo has kind of announced a series of listening sessions and surveys to hear directly from residents about their needs in 4 key areas. Residents are being invited to share their experience on needs and issues on housing, homelessness, children and families, emergency preparedness, and mental health. And the surveys are available in English, Spanish, Tagalog, and simplified Chinese. And there's a website to go to, and I guess I may email that to Scott, and I guess he'll put it on your website.
I'll put it in the minutes.
You mean in the minutes? Okay. Library, San Mateo County Libraries is hosting an author talk with a woman that wrote about the Red as the Sea about Pirate Queen in China. The libraries are also now letting you borrow karaoke machines to their library. Okay, so when this group wants to do a sing-along in the holidays, they'll be able to practice on the karaoke machines that they can borrow from the library. But they also do offer, you can borrow GoPros, sewing machines, bikes, ukuleles, and you can also get county and state park passes. So residents can just get in touch with the Half Moon Bay Library and check with the availability of those different items. They're also offering, the county is now offering a registration for Civics 101. And I took this about 20 years ago when I worked over the hill, and it runs from August 30th through October 25th on Wednesday evenings from 6 to 8:30. And basically attendees will all hear from the various county departments and leaders, from the sheriff's office to the Office of Sustainability, a canine demonstration, mock trial on the court system, and guided tours on Edgewood Trail, etc. It's basically showing you some of the other departments that aren't so visible in the county. There's also on August 5th, the learn how to prepare for family disaster, for a disaster in your family, San Mateo County Event Center, and that's from 10 to 2. And they're also offering on August 16th, a virtual tour of the new 911 dispatch center. So if you've always wanted to know when you dial 911, who answers and what it looks like, they're offering a virtual tour, and it's a question and answer session with public safety after that. I've also gotten several emails on the Medill Creek Bridge and some issues. And I've got an email here from the county gentleman that's in charge of it. And basically they're aware of the situation. They have authorized the contractor to put some riprap in it, and that's going to be done in the next couple of weeks to solidify it. But there has been no structural damage at all to the bridge.
We have a question for you from, begin with Councilmember Williams.
So regarding the Medio Creek Bridge, my understanding is that additional riprap is not warranted and not approved. So can you tell me why the county is able to get around that?
I'm going from just an email. You know what I mean? So I can't tell you, but when I spoke to the citizen that brought us to the attention, he said that this riprap was in the initial coastal development permit. And I don't know. I'm just
Okay.
repeating what I've been
So I'd
told.
like for us to look into that further.
Okay.
Mike, I wonder if you're thinking about the staircase rather than the riprap.
For what we were told is there's the staircase and there's the shotcrete there and water is getting behind the shotcrete. The engineers have looked at it and they see no structural integrity issues with the shotcrete, but that there is going to be some additional riprap placed there. So whether, I'm assuming, if they're doing it, it's approved and pre-approved. Because I don't think they do it if not, but I will double check. I'll just double check tomorrow. Because I got this at like 4:30.
Would you please copy me and Kimberly? Well, send it to the whole council. Who says it's authorized is what we want to know.
Okay.
Okay, and where are they putting it? Because there was a request from a condo owner to reinforce the riprap around his dwelling. I will virtually guarantee you that is not part of the scope of this project. However, protecting
Not aware of that.
the
part.
work they're doing inside the creek, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I just had a quick question about the listening session. Is that the August 9th? For the listening session? For the-
Oh,
at the
yeah,
Measure
that's right.
K?
Yeah.
Because I think these four things have to do with Measure K. Topics.
Well, yeah, those are generally what's funded by Measure K. And yes, thank you for reminding me, Ann. It is on August 9th, the county is having a public hearing on the Measure K funding and how it's going to be allocated in the future. And that's going to be at the Coastside office of Ray Mueller at the Harbor Shops at Harbor Village.
Are you going to be able to attend, Ann? Who's going to go to that?
Yes, I will be attending.
All right, thank you.
That's at 5:30 to 7. So I probably will not be at this meeting then because I'll be down at that one till 7 and then cleaning up afterwards.
All right, Dan has been waiting the longest.
On the 911.
Tours?
Yeah, I just want to say this real quick. I was a couple weekends ago. I'm riding my bike, Capistrano Road and Highway 1. And my eyes are down because I'm kind of maneuvering through this area that I don't want to hit the curb. But as soon as my eyes go down, there's an impact 15 feet over, 25 feet away from me. And it was a high speed impact. And it was a wake up call for me because it's busy weekend. Anyway, I was the first one to go up to the cars to see if it was okay. So immediately call 911. Line's busy. And that's not the first time.
Mm-hmm.
During that flood, remember the flood when Highway 1 was flooded? I called 911 to see if they could get some flares or something to alert the traffic. I was on hold for 20 minutes. Twice. So, 911, I don't know. Am I the first one to bring this to your attention? Anybody else had any problem?
Well, if you had a walkie-talkie to connect to CERT.
Don't sell me on your, it wouldn't work.
So are you asking if someone else has had issues with this?
Has anybody else? I think that there should be some, county maybe should report back to us why, how often.
What day was this, Dan? The most recent incident.
Yeah.
You said it was Saturday, I think. right?
So,
It's not this last Saturday, a week ago.
but the storm is maybe more understandable, but a random Saturday in the middle of a something.
Right. If you can send me the location, the time it happened that you dialed and that line was busy, and I will forward it to the emergency services people.
It's,
I mean,
I don't have that accurate information.
well,
I didn't write a report after I.
right, but you know approximately where it happened in the approximate time. I mean, say between
Yeah.
11:30 or whatever.
Yeah, it's
You know.
not just the one incident. It's there's been other times. So I'm just curious to get a report from 911,
Right.
What is the problem? Is it that they don't have enough staff? What is the problem? That's what I'm asking.
No, it's a legitimate question.
Okay. thank you.
It's a legitimate question, but I can't, give
Well,
an
no,
answer.
get back to us, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's.
Yeah, but I kind of need the date and the time because just to go up there, I say on this date, this is what happened versus, hey, it was busy when I called.
All right, it's a
When
reasonable
you call.
request. Yeah, Claire, you had a question?
Yeah, back to the listening session on the 9th. I think that's important. I think that's something that we should in some way be part of more than just sending in. I mean, that's wonderful, but it's only one person.
It is,
We had brought this up before as a conflict with our meeting, and I guess nothing got looked at.
it's actually not even being run by Ray Mueller. They're just using his office. It's actually being run, I forget what department of the county is running it. And I think they're only doing, my understanding, because I checked to see if they're going to do one in Pacifica. They're not doing one in Pacifica. They're not doing one in Daly City, that there's only two, I think, in the county. I think.
And it
And
runs
this
till
is
7
one of them,
It runs till 7 PM.
5:30 to 7, yes.
All right, let's discuss it under future meeting agendas, what we're going to do about
And
that.
that is a public meeting where anybody can come in.
All right. All right, it looks like we have a couple of questions from the audience here. Claire, Sid Young.
Sorry, I'm trying to get the unmute to go. First of all, hi. Good to see you in person at the meeting. Two things. Actually three things. Dan, first you. 911, if you call from a cell phone, you often get routed to Sacramento CHP, and they really don't always know where places are. If you're saying I'm on Highway 1, they're like, well, what part? What's the town? You know, they don't know. But there is this is for everybody. I have in my phone, my cell phone.
You have a question for Mike?
Yes, I do. Coastside Dispatch's phone number is 650-363-4911. And that goes to Redwood City. So future things. So this is my question for Mike. Is there going to be a community ribbon cutting when that Medio Creek Bridge finally gets finished?
I would hope so.
Okay, well, can you let us
I will
know?
check and find out, okay?
Okay, good.
Yeah, I will
And I
check
will-
and find out because I know there's a lot of interest in that.
All right.
Yeah, there has a lot of anticipation, I would say. Okay, and the other thing is I did take Civics 101 last year and it was fantastic. It's time consuming because you have to drive to Redwood City, but they do give you food that, you know, so you don't come after work on an empty stomach. And they do have downright almost every department in the whole county come and give a presentation,
This isn't
except for
public
parks. They
comment.
wanted us.
Questions for
I'm
elected
just
officials.
saying.
Burnett, do you have something you want to ask Mike O'Neill?
Yeah, Mr. O'Neill indicated that he was working out of the Princeton office. Is he in the office any particular days?
I'm pretty much in there 9 to 5 until the end of next week, yes.
Monday through Friday, you're saying?
Yeah, Monday through Friday, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, do we have other public officials who wish to make comments? I see the esteemed Dr. Rohrback from Half Moon Bay.
So I'm done, right?
Thanks, Greg. Not that esteemed. Samtrans is extending the period that their new Ride Plus service, which is point to point on the coast side, is going to be free. I think it's going to be free until the end of September. I took it. It works. I understand that it only goes from Moonridge up to Princeton, and that's not desirable for the Midcoast to hear that. But I believe if enough people start using it, there'll be pressure on Samtrans to extend it further north on the Midcoast. And it's a wonderful way to get around if you are unable to drive, or even if you're able to drive, to reduce the greenhouse gas emission. And it works. So I think the Midcoast should be aware of that service. Some other news, the Opportunity Center of the Coast Side is being funded through the county. The City Council has approved the initial funding. We're looking for a permanent location, but in the meantime, until we find one, the Chamber of Commerce on Main Street in Half Moon Bay will be the site. The idea there is to have classes to teach people how to write resumes, how to get better jobs. There'll be a startup incubator for businesses, be a place for people to get emails and learn how to write resumes. So that's exciting. That's going to happen starting very soon. And we hope that will continue for a while. So that's going to be on Main Street initially. That's going to be called the Opportunity Center of the Coast Side. The other event that the City Council approved last week is a memorandum of understanding with the county about providing funding and support for 880 Stone Pine, which is going to be a mobile home park for farm workers. It's going to be for low-income farm workers. There's been a very creative MOU that allows Half Moon Bay to pay off the loan that we got for the whole 22 acres. There'll be a 4-acre site that the Half Moon Bay will sell to the county, and the county will be responsible for running the farm worker housing. And that should happen fairly soon, because mobile homes can be built much faster than stick housing. So that's exciting to me. The other information is, I want to repeat what Mike said about the August 5th emergency preparedness that's going to be at the county center. It's going to be free. There are going to be all kinds of classes on CPR. You can see a fire engine. There'll be a stop the bleed education. So that should be nice. And if you don't want to do that, the same day, that's August 5th, from 9 a.m. to 12:30 is going to be the surf dog contest at Lomamar Beach. And that's where I'm going to go. I want to really see surf dogs.
Lindemar Beach. Lindemar Beach.
I'm sorry, Lindemar. Thank you. That's my report. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
All right, we have some hands raised. Questions, Claire or Harvey?
Just very quickly, do you have any information about the usage of the shuttle bus? Is it taking off or is it slow?
Rumor has it, but don't quote me, that it's taking off pretty well. But the more people who use it, as I said, the better it's going to be. There are two vehicles that are in use right now, and the Samtrans could have more if there was a demand for it.
Harvey, how do you call for that bus? Can you put something in the chat? Am I
You don't call for it.
You can go for it.
You just,
Can you give it? Can
it
you
just does a loop,
Can you
right?
get somebody to send us how we request it? I remember Ray Mueller saying if the people in Montera and Moss Beach would start requesting it and then they would get turned down, then eventually they might wake up and realize we want to use it. I know my wife would love to use it.
Interesting. Yeah, there's an app, a Samtrans app that you can use, as well as a phone number that you can call. You can call and they'll come with nominally within 25 minutes after you call.
Who can give us that detailed information?
I'll send it to you.
Thank you. Okay. Council questions for Scott. Council questions for Harvey.
I just have a quick question about the charging station at the B of A on Main Street. Do you know the status of that? You know, the car charging station? Because that parking lot is, all the asphalt's been removed and it's closed off.
No, I don't know anything about it.
Private property, they're probably redoing the parking lot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Dan, you had a question?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So follow-up question along with Claire, do you have any report as far as, how many people are using it per month? Any kind of data at all available? Or could you bring that back next meeting?
I'll find out and bring it back.
Okay. And then the Opportunity Center, the coastside, some of this stuff, I don't know, it's just me, but it seems like some of the stuff would be like perfect for the to be incorporated with a Half Moon Bay Library. I don't know, has that ever been suggested? Or I don't know.
It's a little bit different in that it's so job oriented, but I think having things in one place is good.
Okay, thank you.
Lisa, oh, wait a minute, Gus, you have a question for Harvey?
Yeah. For the Stone Pine farm worker housing, do we know yet how many units we're going to get into that thing?
I've heard various numbers. I can't. I think 50 units is one possibility. It's going to be about that number, but exactly, I don't think it's been determined yet.
Gotcha. Thank you.
All right, Crystalline posted the link to Samtrans in the chat log, so we can make it available as part of the minutes, so that Harvey saves you from having to follow up. Lisa Ketchum, do you have a question for Harvey?
I have a report from planning.
Okay, I don't see any other questions for Harvey unless Sid, are you asking Harvey a question or are you reporting?
Yes, for Harvey.
Okay.
I was waiting to be recognized. Thank you. Harvey, I have a question and that regarding the Samtrans on-demand shuttle. How was it that they decided to not let it go to Pillar Ridge or Moss Beach or Montera, to stop at El Granada or Princeton?
I can't answer that question. You have to ask Samtrans.
Oh, so Gus might know. Okay. And then the other one, 880 Stone Pine is often flooded in the winter season. So are they going to try to do something to make sure that the farm worker housing won't be affected by all the flooding from Pillarcitos Creek?
I believe so. Yes.
I hope so. Okay. That's all I wanted to know.
Okay.
All right. Lisa, you want to give your report from planning then?
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to let you know, I don't know if you recall from the Midcoast Shoreline Erosion Armoring study session I gave last spring, there was a slide on this burned down house on Seal Cove Beach that the slide said that the new owners of the property were going to rebuild the house with a coastal development permit exemption because it was destroyed in a disaster. And I noted that this is under investigation. So the Coastal Commission got involved and had some meetings with county and about this. And so the latest is that the Coastal Commission had sent wording, which the county planner has sent to the property owner, that Coastal Commission staff believes that the rebuilt house does require a CDP, and that the armoring on the beach is in the Coastal Commission jurisdiction, and so modifications to it required a CDP from the Coastal Commission. And they also caution the owner that the replacement house in a new location, set back further, may be considered new, where further armoring or extension of armoring may be prohibited. So that's the resolution there, and basically the assumption then, of course, if a CDP is needed, then all this will be a public process and it will be appealable to the Coastal Commission rather than the CDX where it just happens and nobody gets involved. That's my update. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Crystalline, you had an update for the Chamber of Commerce?
Yes, thank you so much. So Harvey stole my thunder. Thanks for the OCC. So if anybody does have questions about the Opportunity Center, I'm more than happy to answer those. We're super, super excited. We are in talks with the library to answer that question, and we will make sure that there's not an, if there's a class, like let's say resume writing that they already provide, we will work it in and work in conjunction with them, and same with the adult school. So there's some things that the adult school does that we don't need to reinvent the wheel. They have been very much aware of this process since the beginning, so we're excited about that. And then in regards to Samtrans, just FYI, the rideshare program was born out of the Reimagine Samtrans meetings. And the city, the chamber, every stakeholder that was involved with those meetings when the Ride Plus idea was coming up, we were very clear with Samtrans staff that were running those meetings that it needed to be coast-side wide. Our suspicion is that the reason that they made a smaller area is because they wanted to test out the rideshare times, because if somebody had to wait an hour for one of the buses shuttles to get from one end to the coast side to the other, then that would put a bad taste in people's mouth and it would kind of fail before it started. That's our best guess. But we have continued to advocate for the entirety of the coast side, and we have already made little inroads where there's a couple of areas that are just past the harbor that are frequented by farm workers, and we've been able to like, hey, but if you just went like a mile further, you get this farm and this group and all of that. So they're very aware that our real want is the whole coast side. And they're going to continue to work on trying to make that happen. We have heard that it's been really successful. Visitors are actually using it as well. They're coming into the visitor center and getting the information and utilizing it. So the more that, to Harvey's point, people request to go a little bit farther, that'll go a long way in helping with that.
Okay, Sid Young, do you have a report for Montero Water and Sanitary District?
No, but I was going to mention that the fire board open house got rescheduled, and it's going to be on August 8th now at from 6 to 8. So it was supposed to be tonight, and that's why your meeting started late. But now they've postponed it till August, I think it's 8th. Okay.
All right, and with that comment, Claire.
Quick question for Crystalline. Have you looked at locations in the Midcoast for the Opportunity Center? It seems to me that you might want to consider something close to Ray's office for more synergy with the other government resources.
Yes, the ideal facility needs to be a little bit on the larger side due to all the different rooms and classrooms and things that we're looking for. So we've been keeping our eyes open on all kinds. But the other things that we are taking into account, which makes it a little bit more difficult to put it in the Midcoast, is accessibility to the buses and transportation and that kind of stuff. So, but we have been looking all over the coast side, trying to find a place that's just right.
Okay, and with that, we begin public comment. Carl May.
Carl May, Moss Beach. I'll make this short. Looking at the end of your meeting on TV last time you met, there was a discussion about moving the Midcoast Council over to the mall where businesses go to die. I don't know how many of you have been around for 15, 20, 25, 30 years, but there are people in the community here who spent decades fighting that project. That was Westinghouse's last big project on the coast side, even though Westinghouse wasn't the builder. And it was a Westinghouse county deal. The county kept extending their permit and so forth and so on. A lot of us have a real bad feeling about that wall of a building over there and don't feel it was appropriate at all for the Princeton Harbor area in size or in style, and still would feel a little bit creepy about going there to a Midcoast Council meeting. So I would urge you to stay here.
Thank you, Carl. Lisa Ketchum. Or was
Oh,
Lisa?
I'm sorry. I have a comment on the consent item 3C, and if you're going to pull it, I won't make that comment now, but otherwise I'd like to say something about it.
Well, I don't see why we can't entertain the comment.
It's something that's on the agenda, but
You mean, well, normally, as she's pointing out,
It's on consent.
the consent agenda wouldn't be discussed, so I think we have to give her this chance. Go ahead. Lisa?
Okay, so my experience on the planning commission indicates that the same treatment indicates the same treatment in all the unincorporated areas in regard to planning, drainage, streets, and all that, that the features that make the mid-coast semi-rural, you know, the lack of gutters and, I mean, curbs and that. So I guess this it seems as though what you're asking for is to demonstrate that we're not getting what we deserve or something, or that we're getting the short end of the deal. And I just, that hasn't been my experience on the planning commission, that when we approve projects and we see the conditions in those neighborhoods, looks a lot like the Midcoast. That's my point. Thank you.
Okay. So now we do move to the consent agenda. Dan, you have your hand raised for that?
No, public comment.
Public comment.
Yeah, so I just wanted to express that the council, I think, should in every effort keep the meetings the same time as much as possible, and not to be bouncing around. Why? Because we want it to make it easy for community members to come. We don't want to have, everybody has so many things on their mind. They can't keep track. Is it starting at 7:30 this week? Is it starting, So I think, I strongly believe fundamentally, if we continue to bounce around the times for whatever reason, unless it's an absolute, emergency, we're going to have kind of a negative impact on community members, we're going to cause confusion. Might make some people, upset. And even if it's just one member of the community that gets upset, hey, I can't keep track of when the meetings are. We lose one member that's would normally be.
All right, Dan, I feel compelled to reply to this. I only moved the time of the meeting because you and Ann were going to go to the firehouse meeting. And out of respect to allow you to attend the firehouse meeting, we delayed the start. Then they canceled the meeting. And I made the decision not to go back to 7 o'clock, because then I would have had to re-notify 450 people. So this is the only instance I'm aware of where we bounced the time around, and it was for a reason you wanted. So, okay, I get it. We'll try and make sure we have a fixed time. I agree. What that fixed time is, I think, is still open to discussion, but right now it's 7 o'clock. Okay. Consent agenda. We have 4 items on the consent agenda. Is there people who want to pull any or all of them? Kimberly Williams.
I'd like to pull the minutes.
Kimberly's pulling the minutes for discussion. We have a treasurer's report, a letter requesting the county provide us information on the flow of funds to and from the Midcoast, because we don't have any information on that, and requesting funding for a community fiber feasibility study. Attached to that letter are endorsements from 3 local agencies. All right, hearing no objections to those items, can we call for a vote on the consent agenda?
So we're just voting on B, C, and D, right?
Correct. We're not approving the minutes.
Okay, Greg?
Yes.
Claire?
yes.
Gus?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
Kimberly?
Yes.
I'm a yes, and Dan?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, with that, we move to the eagerly awaited regular agenda. And I will do my best to share the screen. I'm having a crash in my computer, sorry. I will do my best to share my screen in a way that allows people to see the slide. There we go. Okay, I should make some introductory comments here. I've worked with a lot of members of the community on this. I have 1,000 photos. I have 200 pages of emails and attachments. Some communities like Burnett, Silveria, and in El Granada have essentially written entire chapters about their requirements. I do not believe any member of the Midcoast Council has actually assisted me in this. You did. You sent me something on Moss Beach, right?
The video.
Right. But most of these comments, I want to say out front, are my own, and I can completely understand if people don't agree with them. Okay. And you're hearing them for the first time. But I do feel after you hear the presentation, I'm going to recommend we prepare a report and a letter, and then we can decide what you all think about what should be in that. So with that, let me just go through scope and process. How did we get here? Well, lots of emails, lots of calls, walking tours of the neighborhoods that I'm discussing, interviews and emails with all the county agencies like SAM and Montero Water and Sanitary District. I also did national outreach to engineers, architects, and other jurisdictions. For instance, the Neponset River Watershed Association in Massachusetts, which manages stormwater. You know, I tried to look around the country and find what I could about best practice elsewhere. The engineers were particularly helpful, as were some of the architects and landscape architects. Some will question why I've included in this non-MCC jurisdictions. And my answer is because we share roads and a sewer plant and watersheds with some of these other areas. And in some cases, failures in those jurisdictions are vulnerabilities for us as well. Also, because I feel social justice requires broad inclusion, and also because we get examples of best and worst practices by looking what's happening elsewhere. So those are the reasons. And what are we doing here tonight? We're gathering feedback and deciding on a path forward. So what I've tried to think of is organizing a report that will be in a series of case studies. And we had a presentation back in January where we went through some of the disasters and the overflows. I'm going to try my best not to repeat all that because we have so much else to discuss. So for instance, Quarry Park in El Granada, we could talk about that for half an hour, but I'm not going to. You know, it's a problem.
There's an echo.
Let me see if I can find who is echoing.
I fixed it.
Okay. All right. I also don't have as much information on Miramar in here as I should have, but suffice it to say there are people in Miramar who have also raised concerns, even though I don't think I have any slides on that. So let's just talk first about Ocean Colony. If I can get this to advance. It didn't have a problem in the storms of December 31st and January. It was built in the late 70s to early 80s. They created their own stormwater management system. The Homeowners Association dues fund maintenance and repairs. No adverse events. They had 2 fairways flooded, but that's part of the design. There's supposed to be swales to catch the water and let it percolate through. I did try to get through the Homeowners Association and the manager information on what they did right and how much it cost, and they wouldn't disclose those details. There's a quote here from their internal report to the homeowners, and they basically say, why was Ocean Colony spared? It wasn't spared, but they had designed it right and maintained it right, so that's why they didn't have a problem. So I found that very instructive, that it's possible to survive these storms with properly designed stormwater from 50 years ago, okay? Then we come to Moonridge, which I'm calling an unmitigated disaster. It was built in a floodplain. You can see here a tweet from Ray Mueller showing some of the damage. I toured this with Joaquin Jimenez of Half Moon Bay. I'm not going into the details today, but there's a thought about a certain culvert that could be built in a particular location to divert some of the water and take care of the problem. When we get to the details, I'll put that in writing in the report, but obviously it's going to take professional engineering to do this. What's interesting on the map is you can see that Ocean Colony is downstream from Moonridge. Moonridge had a problem. Ocean Colony didn't. So something about that affordable housing complex was a problem. We also have problems on 2nd Street in Montera. I think they might have come to a meeting and talked about that. I know Mike, you and Ray and the lady from One Shoreline visited down there and talked to them, and RCD, right. They've had a problem with stormwater that's been documented since 2007. The county spent $200,000 in a study in 2011. At the time, the estimate to do something was 1.5 million plus ongoing costs. But nothing, as far as I can tell, has been done. One resident told me she spent $100,000 to preserve her house and prevent the storm damage. And yet the county continues to permit more homes with impermeable surfaces upstream in that neighborhood just recently. So there's no evidence of mitigation. The slide picture I'm showing here is of a ditch, which would be on East Street, which comes downhill and drops onto 3rd, which then drains into 2nd. That fence is at least 6 feet high. It might be 8 feet high. The gully that exists there is about 12 feet deep. Okay, so I'm just showing you, this is an example of unmitigated stormwater, and it's the stuff uphill, which also is draining downhill and causing the problem. El Granada, in addition to what Burnett has pointed out, there were some landslides uphill. Here, I got a photo from Karen Allison about El Granada Boulevard. And then there was a resident who contacted me. She was very worried that one of the trees in the medians at El Granada was going to fall over on her house. The dog in the picture shows to scale how big that tree is. That's my dog. He's a big dog. So we have a problem with the soil being wet and the root systems are shallow and the winds are knocking these things over. There was a lady I met whose house on El Granada Boulevard was crushed by a tree. You probably heard of her. She had to move out. And then we have Quarry Park, where we performed a significant amount of thinning of eucalyptus for wildfire fuel reduction. But I'm noting that no good deed goes unpunished because eucalyptus trees are noted for the absorption of water that they provide. In some countries, they use eucalyptus to empty swamps because they suck up so much water. So by taking out those eucalyptus, we may have exacerbated the problem on Santa Maria. And we'll see on the lower left, the solution that worked temporarily to divert some of the stormwater that was all running down Santa Maria and shuttle it off sideways into other parts of El Granada. As Burnett mentioned, it isn't a permanent solution because now you have to take care of the rest of El Granada. And it still wasn't what I would consider acceptable stormwater management because the driveways are still getting flooded, but at least it wasn't going into the homes. And then we have Seal Cove, which I'm titling Slip Sliding Away. If you visit it, bikers that I know have told me they can no longer bike through that area. They have to dismount, unclip their little shoes from their pedals, carry their bike up 2 feet in order to continue pedaling. The claim was made it settled 18 inches just this year alone. You can see in this picture, there's a fellow whose driveway is now separated from the land. And my favorite picture is this one. If you look closely at the horizontal lines on the garage door and compare that to the slope of the roof and the driveway. So apparently people in Seal Cove have been living with this for a long time. I met residents who lived next to properties that were flooded for about 2 years. There are some unique water and sewer system burdens in that area. Kimberly, you have a question?
I do. My understanding of these areas that you're showing in Seal Cove is that some of this is partially due to other factors, not water erosion.
Take engineering to know, right, what causing the subsidence of that land. Okay. But it's certainly worth looking at, in my opinion.
I think they have looked at it. It's been going, it's not something that's just started a few years ago.
No,
it's been going on and on. I think there's some known geological settlement. It's beyond, I don't think that should be, part of this, to be honest with you.
Well, the residents of Seal Cove disagree with you, and they have written me extensively.
It's not
Okay.
from stormwater, Greg.
Okay.
We're in a very geological, slow-moving landslide area, and the county, long time ago in 1995, chose to close Ocean Boulevard rather than keep it repaired, and all of the lots are slowly moving towards Ocean Boulevard now and the ocean. So
Okay.
it's a geological hazard zone.
So Dan's point is maybe it doesn't belong in this report. I'm open to that, but I do have to
If
have
there,
dialogue with the residents.
if there are separate stormwater runoff concerns, then sure, include it. But the things that you pointed out, I think, are things not attributable to that.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay. And then we have Moss Beach. The main photo here is the house that was crushed by the tree that fell, another example. And that area just where Carlos Street comes down to Etheldor in California. When I was trying to post the agenda in March, we had a storm, heavy rain that started about an hour after it started. I went to post the agenda. And by the time I had posted it to the post office box, I couldn't get back out of California on Carlos Street. It had already flooded. So there's a problem there.
Caltrans.
Why Caltrans?
Well, the drainage system that is the lowest point.
Okay.
So if the lowest point to drain doesn't drain, what
Okay.
happens?
Well, so the engineer at MWSD gave me the following information. No organized management of the water accumulation. Stetson and Carlos drainage damages homes and flood streets. I saw what Barbara Matheson was living with, on her property. And in addition, the engineer at MWSD cites in this paragraph that the overwhelming infiltration is causing stress on the sewer system. Okay. He also goes into some technical details about the culverts not being sized right and some filters that are put on that aren't cleaned regularly. Okay. And that back up. Down in Half Moon Bay, some of you are aware that there are gullies of some size opening up on Wave Crest. I don't know if you hike down there. They've gotten large over the years. I think it's called the Seymour Ditch. Half Moon Bay has a project to do something about that. You can see in Wave Crest that a few years ago, Half Moon Bay seems to realize they had a problem with infiltration and inflow getting into the sewer pipes. So they've raised about a dozen of their sewer manholes, as you can see in this picture, but notice the crack in the red box. So it's just unclear whether the problem has really been solved. I did want to get
cracks.
What?
Concrete
Cracks,
commonly
right.
cracks.
You may remember the San Bruno explosion that PG&E suffered through. As a result of that, they had to undertake a survey of all the sewer lines and laterals in cities throughout the county. They did El Granada. When I heard about that, I got a hold of the guy at PG&E who was doing it, who the contractor was that was doing it, and talked to the guy on the truck who did the same thing for Half Moon Bay. So they have had a complete survey of their pipes to try and identify the infiltration and inflow and other leakage problems, primarily to identify any gas mains that were going through it. I don't have the results of it. We also know we have overflow problems at SAM. We're still awaiting a study of the causes of the overflows there. This just shows Half Moon Bay has a capital improvement plan going forward of 12.4 million, I believe, of which 10 million is unfunded. There's nothing in this plan to deal with the I&I near the sand plant. Okay. You're aware the sand plant has overflowed beyond capacity the last 2 Decembers. The intertie pipeline system that connects the northern communities to the south was broken due to excess pressure because they were holding back the sewer flows to save the plant.
Now I'll let you see it.
Save the plant, but the pipes burst. If the fines for the spills were levied, it could be $30 to $40 million. My hope is they're not going to enforce the fines. Half Moon Bay is disputing the reinvestment required to fix those pipes. And there are some FEMA funds that they're waiting for to take care of the direct damages. So my summary is this. and Ann, you can speak to this as a person who's been flooded out of her house. Homes and roads are being flooded regularly in the newly severe storms. The sewer plant nearly failed. Trees are falling to the soil weakened by saturation, crushing homes and blocking evacuation routes. You may remember the trees that fell that blocked Highway 1 north of the Lantos Tunnel. Decades of permitting construction of impermeable surfaces coupled with escalating climate change have created unsafe conditions for living and travel in the Midcoast and compromised emergency response, not to mention the impact on water quality. I'm not prepared to talk about water quality. I did meet with the folks at Lorenas and others and got some information from them, but I don't have anything in the way of a comprehensive survey of what the water quality impact is. We do know that the beach at Fitzgerald Marine Reserve was at one point labeled the worst in the state. My understanding from Ed is they just stopped analyzing it 2 years ago, so we don't see it on the list anymore. Okay. But there's probably a water quality problem as well. So what seems to be missing? Well, first, to me, public safety. Secondly, there is no stormwater master plan for the Midcoast or for the county as a whole. The engineer from Montera couldn't even find a stormwater asset inventory for the Midcoast, which would be kind of a normal thing you would see. What are the culverts and all that stuff? There's a stormwater position in the Department of Public Works, which has not been filled since, I don't know, Mike, sometime last year. I asked about it on December 6th. I reported December 6th. It was told to me it wasn't filled. And while there are some fees collected related to stormwater, they are for permitting and inspection. CCAG collects, I think, $7.68 per parcel. That goes toward a staff that helps get the discharge permit from the Regional Water Quality Control Board. They've done some interesting work on new technologies for trying to solve runoff problems on streets, putting little gardens on the sidewalks. And they've also done an interesting study down near the sand plant on building a reservoir there. But they don't have any authority to manage stormwater. They're just an advisory sort of consulting group. Planning collects permitting fees for inspection costs and stuff, but there's no funding collected to build or maintain the stormwater infrastructure in our area or the county as a whole. Further, as far as I can tell, there's no visible process on stormwater management, and I can't find anybody in the county that owns this problem. Let me just point out this slide you saw when Reed Bogert from CCAG came. This is 10-year-old data that he collected and showed that we had $504 million in capital expenditures required to implement the master plans for the cities that are listed, and we only had $3 million in annual revenue. Reed has not updated this study. Interestingly, Pacifica does have a charge for funding stormwater infrastructure, and the county is off of this list. In other words, there's no master plan, there's no estimate of the revenue collected, and what I'm finding is none. So we probably have $1 billion in costs in these cities by now, 10 years later. Okay, so now who's in charge? As I said, the Department of Public Works has a department or a position for stormwater, but there's nobody there. Planning approves permits and collects fees, but it doesn't apparently plan stormwater. CCAG coordinates, City and County Association of Governments coordinates the discharge permit, but it's an advisory focus. One Shoreline has a legal charter for county flooding. And I met with Len Matterman and Debbie Ruddock in December, I think it was. But he doesn't have any staff or funding for stormwater, and his focus on Bay side mostly and sea level rise. Half Moon Bay, again, they have a stormwater capital expenditure plan, but it's largely unfunded and it doesn't seem to address the stormwater issues around the plant. And RCD has been very helpful. They've been known to get things done, but they are demand response driven by grants. When they ask to come in, they help. Okay. Several of these entities pointed to CCAG as the logical person to take over management of stormwater. So here are some potential solutions. One is to stop constructing impermeable surfaces until a validated stormwater management system exists. And by validated, I mean one that is proven to work. Then there's some thoughts I have on management and organization, redefining and improving planning, focusing some priority problem areas, creating fiscal sustainable funding, and escalating concerns above the county level. So let me just go through those. One question is, why do we stop building? Of course, that's going to be very controversial, but the reasons to stop are to avoid adding to an infrastructure deficit we already have and to prevent increasing the liability for the county, because they're putting people at risk with every impermeable surface they permit. As some of the ladies in El Granada have pointed out, there's a risk of saltwater intrusion and water table damage, and we need to provide land, and this is my term, for regenerative water retention. The more water we keep, the better we can protect the water table we have. We can prevent, for instance, the airport wells that Montera has from getting saltwater intrusion. Another reason to stop is to price the solution to stormwater and establish a hold harmless approach so that current residents are not further put at risk, either financially or physically, from extra development. And we can figure out how much we should be charging on impact fees before we let the next building go. And I'm going to say this, the county has proven incapable of safely managing stormwater here. That is my conclusion. People are already losing home insurance, and I don't think we should increase the risk to the homeowners here. And I was participated in talking to Berman's office about the wildfire aspect, but insurers are leaving the state. It's a long story, but stormwater would just give them another reason. So what can we do about management? Well, put somebody in that vacant Department of Public Works position, empower one agency to oversee stormwater management, empower planners and project managers to work across functional boundaries. We have a functionally organized county, but sometimes getting things done requires a focus on a specific geography or area and being able to mobilize planning and DPW and all the other agencies together. Create a stormwater management plan, first for the Midcoast, simply because I'm taking a parochial view that we don't have one and we have these problems, but really for the entire county. And something that I found that has been done in the city of Orinda, they formed a Citizens Infrastructure Oversight Commission back in 2020. The reason is that they had stormwater and road repair and gas lines and power lines, and now we have fiber, internet stuff, a lot of stuff being done. You save a lot of money if you just dig once. And so that group was successful. It's been expanded, and now they even empowered it by giving it a certain share of tax revenues, okay, that they get to spend to decide and control what's done. I don't know whether we form another commission. Maybe the CDRC could be rechartered to include considering the sustainability of the infrastructure as well as just architectural features. I know we're short a lot of volunteers there, but I'm going to say that it was a success in Orinda. I don't see why it shouldn't be somehow adopted here. Then we have issues with the science and engineering. The design storm that is in the county's drainage manual is ridiculously low. And I say that as my opinion, but I've heard it from several engineers as well. The risk assessment doesn't exist. Nobody looks at the actual exposure to risk over time in the same way they do earthquakes and tsunamis. You're probably familiar, you get an estimate that there's going to be a big quake with a 62% probability over the next 30 years. Well, there's nothing like that for stormwater. They look at it like a storm at a time. The drainage manual for the county needs to be redone until the guidelines that they're espousing are proven to work. There have to be some defined metrics for success or failure of a stormwater system. In other words, what level storm are we willing to let flood us, and what levels of storm are we not? And it's not just one storm, it's often storms in sequence that cause a problem. And I think we need to get expert help. And as I mentioned, we need a stormwater master plan. Just so you understand, the design storm currently used now is a 90% 10-year storm, which is about 4 inches of rain in 24 hours. Our storms, according to Montero Water and Sanitary District's report, are 6, 7, and 8 inches every year. The cumulative probability of being protected from the 90% 10-year storm. Just that is about 0% over 10 years. So we've massively underinvested, and our design guidelines to me are really lacking. In fact, the standards we have imply accepting a failure due to cost factors. And I got from one of the Half Moon Bay planning commissioners a copy of the manual. And you can see underlined in red, it says it would be infeasible to size stormwater treatment measures to treat runoff from large storms that include everything, meaning they don't want to impair the development by requiring the money to be spent to avoid putting us at risk. So I go back to, okay, so don't build. Well, if you can't do it right, don't do it. And I also think that the cost of failure needs to be included in the analysis these people are doing. When they talk about it's too expensive, well, what's the cost of not doing? What's the cost to us? The stormwater management plan that I'm advocating should have the following content: an assessment of the current storm handling requirements versus our existing capacity, including a hydraulic model to analyze the risk and the trade-offs on return on investment. In other words, how much money is it worth spending here or there for what risk reduction? A robust design with costs of the stormwater systems required to fix our vulnerabilities. Those costs need to be both additional and perpetual. Again, this is for contents of a stormwater management plan. There need to be permitting and design requirements, not guidelines. Requirements for new construction that fit within the rated stormwater capacity. There needs to be an asset inventory, professionally maintained and repriced. There need to be perpetual prices to ensure stormwater drainage is funded, constructed, and maintained in accordance with the guidelines, including planning and permitting, and an audit and adjustment process with inspection, enforcement, and remediation and restitution. If somebody gets flooded, they should be able to claim damages against the county. Okay. And then we need a management organization and process. In other words, a management organization needs to exist, needs to be defined whose responsibilities are what, and it should be a regional scope. Some of the people I've talked to in Half Moon Bay agree Half Moon Bay should be included. In fact, it needs to go beyond Half Moon Bay because Pillowshitos Creek is managed by SFPUC. And that was one of the reasons that the sand plant was flooded. I'm also going to suggest that the planning staff contains a bunch of capable people who maybe could be managing some of these projects, okay, instead of doing work on permitting construction for houses. I know it'd be a change in skill set, but planners often are adaptable and rapidly become experts in a lot of things. Gus picked up on this. I said this at another meeting. The idea that we're spending all this time worrying about whether a building is a foot too tall is like polishing the bell on a sinking ship in a storm. You know, what we really need to do is worry about the infrastructure underneath it. And I think we need the administrative capacity to apply for a bunch of grants everywhere we can find them to help reinforce our infrastructure. Okay, so this is just some comments on fiscal sustainability. We should start saving money by stopping adding to the problem. And we shouldn't build anymore until we have an impact fee, until the county has funded the first generation of stormwater infrastructure. And what I'm saying here is the county permitted this work and collected taxes from it from homeowners for years, but failed to develop a stormwater infrastructure that was adequate. So they should build the first generation, but it's going to be perpetual. It's going to require ongoing operation and maintenance, and as you heard, cleaning. And then those assets are going to wear out and have to be replenished. So there needs to be a parcel tax that will fund that too. And of course, the size of the lot and the size of your impermeable surfaces probably are factors that determine how much you should be charged. And all fees have to be indexed to the replacement cost of the infrastructure. Just so you know, we're talking about an engineering consulting firm said a new drainage manual for the county would be $50,000 to $200,000. A study of the vulnerability of SAM in the area around Pillowshitos Creek would be $150,000. An assessment of where the infiltration in the SAM pipes in Half Moon Bay area are coming from would be at least $600,000. A county-wide stormwater management plan would be $1 million. Now, there'd be less for just us, but that's the kind of money we're looking at. And then there's some other items which I don't have prices for. Fixing the infiltration and inflow at SAM, maybe relocating and redesigning the entire SAM plant, fixing Surfers Beach and the erosion there, and fixing the evacuation route jeopardized by stormwater and wildfire and other things north of Lantos Tunnel would be more money. Just as another data point, the Second Street design done in 2011 was a cost of 1.5 million initial cost. Right now, that's probably $3 million. And their design is probably not adequate for the current storms we have, because remember, it was done 12 years ago and the storms now are more intense. But if we assumed we had 8 local wet spots at 3 million each, that'd be $24 million. So it's probably more than that. The City and County Association of Governments had a retention pond near the sand plant that they designed. It does not handle the wastewater, but it does handle stormwater. To make it handle wastewater would be more, but the estimate was $3 million. The dams upstream in Pillsbury Creek that are failing, I want to say the Army Corps engineer, I can't remember the name of the entity that did the estimate, was $30 million. And as you saw from CCAG, there's unfunded hundreds of millions of dollars countywide in other cities. And then we come to the question of escalation. Do we escalate these concerns above the county level? The Regional Water Quality Control Board, frankly, this is grand jury stuff to me. State elected officials, federal elected officials, California Coastal Commission, more. And then where do we get an independent audit of the county actions? Maybe a professional engineering firm, maybe the Regional Water Quality Control Board, but we need to make sure that what the county does has the appropriate condition, right, and capacity to handle the stormwater, and that after major storms, we need to ensure the infrastructure worked. So here's the ask. Stop making things worse until you make them safe. Create a stormwater master plan. Create a sustainable county drainage manual. Drainage manual is a thing that is used when you construct a new property, a new structure that you have to meet to make sure you don't make things worse. We need funding from the county to solve the problem and manage it forever. And we need to involve the local agencies who are affected. And this would include Half Moon Bay and the Sewer Authority and us. And we should have participation in that planning process. And I'm arguing that the county should start now fixing the problem with the money we pay annually and then follow the stormwater master plan. And I consider this a social justice imperative. The first social justice to me is sustainability. If we cannot pass on to our descendants a sustainable world, we're failing in our primary purpose. And unmanaged stormwater threatens the health, the safety, and affordability of human life on the coast. We're uniquely vulnerable. Farm workers, mobile home parks, and seniors who are house rich and cash poor. And then we have all the tsunami, earthquake, sea level rise, wildfire, flooding risks, and one tenuous evacuation route. So my idea for a new tenant protection ordinance is let's keep the housing we already have and prevent the next generation of homelessness. What I think our next steps are to incorporate comments from this meeting and emails from concerned residents, prepare a written report to the county, email the stakeholders, the agencies involved, gather endorsements from local agencies and stakeholders, and then forward the report and endorsements again and request action. And I'm open to thoughts about an escalation strategy, escalation for both funding and for motivation to action. So I know that was a lot. And I would like to open it up for comments. I see 2 public comments. Sid Young.
Thank you for that, Greg. It was a lot. One of the things that you might have missed when you said there's nothing, the county doesn't have any infrastructure or a history of stormwater. The MCC website actually has all of that because there was a stormwater task force one public works director ago when Jim Porter was in charge and Catherine sat on that. But of course, they did all kinds of futzing around, and then they said, well, we don't have any money for it. So nothing got done. They just did a lot of studying. And Lisa Ketchum has put a lot of that up there on that website. So you should try to look for it. It has a list of all the El Granada storm drains and everything, which just flow into the ocean. Secondly, the Half Moon Bay capital improvement 5-year plan, which is really basically just a wish list, since they've $10 million or more is unfunded. But that does affect the rest of us, because as they refuse to pay for the SAM improvements on the intertie pipeline where it burst up in Montero, that's going to impede the progress of Cypress Point, which is a 71-unit project in Moss Beach Heights that will quickly overwhelm the SAM plant and the intertie pipeline in between. So I agree with you on all of the infrastructure lack of, I guess you would call it maintenance and improvement. So CCAG is 20 cities, and it does include the county, but they don't really pay any attention to what the needs of the unincorporated area are, as you probably noticed when you had Reed Bogart in from CCAG. And if there's any kind of equivalent to what our stormwater lacks, it's the lack of an emergency evacuation plan, which many of us have been asking for probably a decade, and there's no accountability. So you can ask for it and they shrug their shoulders while we're working on it, or, oh, we have no money for it or whatever, but we don't have an evacuation plan still. And I don't know when we're going to have it. Thank you.
Okay, Melinda McNaughton, you're next.
Hi, Greg. Thank you. That was a great presentation, and you did a ton of research, and you raised a ton of great questions. So I just wanted to talk about some nature-based infrastructure solutions. And if you don't have time for that, I would like to suggest an expert presentation. I can get an expert to speak about that, because I think the combined nature-based solutions regarding stormwater infrastructure and conventional infrastructure that's already in place could work really well.
Well, could you just spend 60 seconds and explain the kind of nature-based solutions you're talking about? Just so the rest.
Well, so basically the idea is that plants and soil plants can hold the soil in place regarding erosion, and that the soil has to be super healthy, with microbes and fungi and insect ecosystems in it, in order to stay healthy and absorb the water that's coming at it. So a lot of the thing that's happening is that we have problems with unhealthy soil that's not absorbing the water. We also have problems with drought that dries out the soil, and then the soil can't infiltrate the water in forests. And that's why we have a lot of death of trees in forests dying off. But it's really, I think, some of the ways that it can happen. The method is called the decentralized water retention system, and it mimics how nature works, basically. And what it does is it slows the flow of the water down by spreading out different pathways for it to go. And you look basically at the different ways that water's coming down from the hill, or where it's puddling, or where it's traveling traditionally or historically. And then you spread it out in different areas. So you spread it out in these different paths all over. And then you have meandering streams and bioswales in those to slow it down. And then it sinks into the ground because you have the health of the soil and healthy plants and trees along those pathways to sink it down. And then once it's sunk, it's stored into our groundwater, refills and replenishes the groundwater. So you have to have pathways that aren't concrete based in order to sink the water down in the ground and get it absorbed, so that when you have a storm, it can absorb this high rate of of like you're saying, 6 inches per hour or whatever of rain coming
It's
down.
24-hour, yeah.
Yeah, 6 inches in 24 hours, because the soil should be able to handle that in most places. If it's healthy, it can absorb and infiltrate that much water if it's healthy. So I think there's a problem with the soil, and some of it has to do with compaction. Some of it has to do with us messing with the land, removing a lot of plants and trees. It has to do with us putting chemicals on the land. So there's problems with the soil regarding that. That's not the only problem. Let's see, the other methods that I have been looking at that are related are something that can be easily and cheaply done within cities and towns are these, it's called a notched curb or a curb cut method, where the water coming down in your gutters and your curbs in the streets, you cut a little notch, and then you kind of put an indent in the soil or create a basin. And this is like on curbs where there's plants, or you can plant curbs in those little strips that are near the sidewalks near your house. And sometimes we have natural bioswales in El Granada regardless, because we have old sidewalks and we have plants growing up through the gutters. And those actually are great bioswales that sink water down into the water tables. But the notched curb cut method actually has the water will flow in from the curb into those little basins and plants that are lining the sidewalks. So that's
Melinda, I don't mean to cut you off because I know you're proposing something valuable here, but what I'm going to suggest is that you participate in writing a section of the report explaining these nature-based solutions and what is required.
Okay.
And I'd like to move on to some of the other speakers for the time.
Sure.
And if the council agrees, then certainly we can obtain a presentation by the experts that you're talking about.
Okay, can you offer her just to be able to summarize and just finish? Give her a second.
You want a second to summarize, Melinda?
Sure. I mean, I just wanted to say that I guess the most important thing to remember is that what I have learned is that everything plays a part. The trees, the soil, the water, the air, they actually all create our climate and our weather. So it's really important to work with nature in order to manage the water that's coming at us. So I think that it could really help. So, and I'm going to just put in the chat some links to these really informative websites that you can check out on these different ways to manage stormwater.
Thank you.
Plus, she has also emailed me a lot of links and explanation on this issue. Burnett, you're next.
Thanks.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to emphasize some of the problems with the very little, what they're calling basically stormwater, the selection of stormwater projects that the county is doing. They seem to title them drainage projects, but they did do one to partially, that's the problem. They're only partially addressing the problem. For the Quarry Park, it starts at Quarry Park up at Columbus, runs down Santa Maria to the Alameda, and it used to run down Avenue Cabrillo down to a storm drain in Avenue Alhambra. Well, back in 2018, 2019, they put in a project that resolved the problem down Avenue Cabrillo to Avenue Alhambra, but they never addressed the problem from the source at Quarry Park down Santa Maria to the Alameda. The other project that's on the books right now for the county to do is out at Ferdinand. And if you look at the project down in Ferdinand, it's the same sort of thing. They're only addressing the problem up Ferdinand, up to the Alameda, where the water is actually starting from Columbus Street again and running down Avenue del Oro and Santa Cruz Avenue, San Carlos Avenue. So, and that particular runoff on Ferdinand is not as bad as the runoff on Portola. So how they're selecting these projects and why they're only partially resolving the problem, I have no idea. I don't know if anybody else is aware of this. That's why I'm bringing it up. The other thing that I wanted to comment on, just as some additional information, was Greg brought up about the design storm metrics. Well, just so that you know, for the drainage and erosion control in Quarry Park, they're designing the culverts and the piping that they're doing for that for 100-year storms. So if they're doing that anywhere else, they're dumping 100-year storm water down into a storm system that's the much lower, 4-year storms or whatever you were saying, Greg. So if there's anything else like that in some of these projects, you have to look closely at how their metrics are being, their erosion and drainage control projects are being designed and what's being dumped into, quote, storm drain systems that aren't being designed for 100-year storms. Thank you.
Thanks, Burnett. Lisa Ketchum?
She's muted.
We'll wait for her. Lisa, you're muted.
Darn. Okay, so Pillar Ridge has the same financial setup for drainage as Ocean Colony. It created and Pillar Ridge created and maintains their stormwater system, funded with space rent dollars from the homeowners with no outside agency help. This is the same structure that funded and maintains Pillar Ridge Community Center, playground, and swimming pool, all financed by Pillar Ridge homeowners of this neighborhood. And I just wanted to point out, you had referenced the Montero 2011 drainage study for the 2nd Street, Canoff, and East Avenue area, which resulted in a proposed project which was to be paid for by the neighborhood, and no one was interested in doing it, so that's why it didn't happen. And then as far as your suggestion to, pull current planners off to do this study and stop new development, stop approving new development, basically, this isn't going to work because the county will just get sued. This comes up at the Planning Commission. I just wanted to point out, so the Midcoast isn't treated differently as a new development in the unincorporated county is reviewed by the 2019 Drainage Manual and must meet the standard to avoid any increase in runoff from the pre-development state of that parcel. New projects are not expected to fix existing flooding issues. The director, county council are clear on that in their instructions to the commissioners. As the planning commissioner, I've reviewed projects in hilly areas, Palomar Park, Emerald Lake Hills, both of those today, with narrow, some standard roads with open drainage ditches and reports of landslide or flooding in the neighborhood. Although neighbors come and bring up these concerns at the hearing, we are told, the commissioners are told, that the new project under review is not expected to address those wider issues. Obviously, if you propose stopping approving new development, there's going to be a lot of people who will be upset about that, the sand car and everything. But I'm just observing. I'm not saying the county's right. I'm just observing this, that they are complying with this manual, which obviously is not that old, and they're very clearly not taking on the larger issue. And the assumption would be, I guess, that if improvements are to be made, they will be paid by local assessments and not countywide. That's my assumption, because that's how it's always been done, and whatever. I don't know. And then I just wanted to say to Belinda, if you have any info and links to add to the Midcoast Watershed and Drainage page, I appreciate your input.
Thank you.
Lisa, could I reply to a couple of things? One is, could you share anything about the design, maintenance, and costs that have made Pillar Ridge successful? Because I was unable to get Ocean Colony to provide me that information. I would like to compare and contrast what you've done successfully and what it costs with what is not being done elsewhere.
Well, of course, we're at the bottom here. This community was built on a wetland, which something couldn't happen today. But the original was built in the mid 60s, and it was not, the drainage, it was bad. And there was a class action lawsuit here, and the owner of the park, 1990, then different owner, completely renovated the streets, the drainage, and that all works great. Any water that falls on the community itself drains down the middle of the street and all downhill and goes into the marsh. But that said, like this past winter, we have 3 wells here, and the wells start artesianing. I don't know, is that a verb? You go look at the wellhead, it's about 1.5 feet off the ground, and there's water squirting out. It's groundwater just coming out. So it's a different sort of situation we have here. Obviously, no more water, no more rainfall is going to go into the ground at this point. It's coming up out of the ground. But basically, we are self-sustaining here. The residents own their homes. They got to pay the rent on the space. Otherwise, they'll get evicted. And so you have a budget to work with, and so we have these amenities, and they have a reserve account. And when the culvert under the parking lot needed to be replaced, they did it, and it cost a whole lot of money. But it just comes out, basically it's taxing ourselves.
Okay, thanks for that. I do want to mention there's a point of dispute. You were the second person to tell me that the people on First and Canoff and Second decided not to go ahead with paying for the stormwater project. I also have emails from residents when I asked them who say they've lived there since 1984 and nobody asked them to pay for anything. So I don't know,
Well, the minutes, the whole report is there on the webpage and at the different meetings, and the final meeting at the Fair Lawn View School.
Okay.
Nobody showed up. So what are you going to do?
Nobody showed up. Okay. All right. Jane Praysilver.
Hi, well, that was a wonderful report, Greg. I really like the idea of getting the municipalities involved in trying to solve the problems. On a kind of more lower level about this, everybody knows that we are at an ecological tipping point, and we need to take these things seriously, and we need to really take a look. I think, Greg, you alluded to this in your slides. The profitability versus the sustainability, that balance has got to start to shift. But my smaller idea is to get all of the neighbors involved in looking at their property. I thought that there could be an all hands on deck. The way there's an emergency, all hands on deck means that you need to look at your property in 3 areas. One is for fire safety, and that's not only fuel reduction, but how can you harden your home with the proper kinds of vents that don't let embers in and that kind of thing. The second part of that would be flooding. How can you open up your own property so that the water can go down? And then the third would be how to start integrating in native plants over the long haul. So I just think if we could get that information easily accessible to neighbors, when you look at all of the properties in aggregate, that would be a lot of solution implementation. And it's certainly not everybody can do everything, but I'm seeing people spending a lot of money on putting in wood fences when now the insurance companies are saying you have to have some metal to separate it from your home. Vents could go in, those sorts of things, I bought some expensive curtains and realized that's one of the things that brings fire into your home. And the more we can keep the firemen having to come and protect the homes, the more that they can put out the fire. So I think that we could have this kind of public accessibility to knowledge solutions and see if we can attack it also on that end, as well as the municipalities. Thank you.
Okay, I see no more members of the public. Oh, there's Carl May. I see you now.
So this subject is near and dear to my heart because it's been brought up repeatedly over the years. And my little block of Sierra Street in Moss Beach, every winter with any rain, we have giant puddles that we never had before the county came into our area and encouraged paved streets, curbs, gutters, sidewalks, and so forth. And when they did that, they high-centered by the way, they let each block vote on this. Our block voted against putting in the paved street and so forth, as much as they told us our property values would go up and so forth. not at all true. Our house is worth just as much as anybody else's house. So anyway, they high-centered California Street. They cost Montero Water and Sanitary District quite a bit of money to raise the height of the manholes when they high-centered that street. And the water flows off to either side of that. The other streets that they paved in that part of Moss Beach all have additional runoff. This is associated with the amount of hardscaping that you were talking about. Hardscaping is roofs and pavement, essentially. And the amount of runoff is directly related to the amount of hardscaping in an area. The other thing that happens is that instead of plant life and so forth absorbing or at least slowing down the flow of water through an area, what we have now in all of these coastal towns is water coming off in pulses. And whereas previous to all the forced development, that did not happen, at least not nearly to the degree it happens now. With these pulses, another thing that happens is our local streams, both the seasonal streams and the year-round streams, with this pulses of runoff are cut down below their normal natural stream beds. And so that we have gullied out streams in a number of places on the coast side. So that's yet another effect of too much runoff all at once. Over the years, as the local coastal plan, which is an overview of our zoning here, came up for review, some of us would bring these things up and just get blown off the table. They don't want to hear about this kind of stuff with the LCP at the county. The county hearings on the local coastal plan, it's supposed to be revised every 10 years. It doesn't get done that often. They don't want to hear about this kind of stuff because that's not what their concern is. The other thing that happened is even after the Coastal Act came into effect and all of that, the county redid all of our floor area ratios, setbacks, lot coverage ratios, and so forth. And all of that is directly related to the amount of runoff, of course. It's hardscaping that's coming in. Those floor area ratios, the setbacks, affect how much hardscaping is going in on each lot that gets developed. And then you have these cumulative effects for our area. So what you're talking about is retrofitting an area where these things were poo-pooed, essentially, when we're talking about things before. I hate to hear how we're all going to have to pay for this when a lot of us raise these concerns. And the developers and real estate industry and so forth that essentially drive the county on these kinds of things. We, just as a matter of fact, our floor area ratios, our lot coverage ratios, our setbacks and so forth are the same as densely populated suburbs over on the other side of the hill, on this side of the hill. And obviously we're not the same as Burlingame or San Mateo or places like that. So that's something to consider, to change these essentially the county code for floor area ratios, lot coverage ratios, setbacks. Lisa mentioned that we're not supposed to have any new net runoff from new projects. Is that being enforced? Because a new house just went in across the street from me where there's going to be runoff into the street to add to our already great puddles that we have with every rain. So I'm all for the nature-based solutions and this sort of thing, but you're going to have a heck of a time. And you will have a heck of a time suggesting a moratorium on development until we can get our act together. The only time we had a moratorium on development is the only reason Montero and Moss Beach are still fairly livable. There was a water moratorium for a couple of decades there on new hookups. You know, that's out the window now.
Thanks for your time. Now, for the council, I see Dan, you wanted to be first.
Yeah, thank you. Greg, you brought up so many, so much, there's no way I can address everything. This big movement for all these ADUs, that's another thing that's gonna, take, not allow for the soil to naturally, absorb. Excuse me. I agree wholeheartedly with pretty much everything that Melinda was saying. I think that's the right track. I think possible a lot of these erosion problems were just poorly maintained environment, proper whether it's proper planting, proper types of plants, whether there's possibly Roundup used that could, damage the soil so bad that it just can't. And I do want to say one of the worst parts of the storm, my house, I'm a block away from the flood zone. Over the years, not every year, but often it'll flood, puddle, and it'll a lot of water and gets under the house. Portable sump pumps required. It was frustrating making sure, get out there with a hoe, making sure everything kind of drains out to the street. And then you go down, the street, the gutter is, this wide with water flowing down. So there was a lot of water at the same time. I did walk down. I was curious to the storm drain at the end of the block, and sure enough, it was flowing. It was flowing. I don't know if it was impeded, but I think the area to look in general, all the water comes down the hill and has to go underneath the highway. Well, Caltrans is responsible for the drainage under the highway. I have witnessed big boulders in some of those culverts over the years, and I called maintenance. They couldn't handle it. It was too much for them. So what they did is they waited until the whole culvert collapsed. I mean, it was a sinkhole bigger than what you see now. This was what, 5 years ago, 6, maybe 8 years ago. So that's what they did. They didn't clear the drain. They just waited until it just collapsed, and then they fixed it. It's still standing. They did a great job. They know how to fix things, but I don't think they know. They have a problem with their maintenance department. They just don't like to maintain. Now I can't watch every culvert. I can't look everywhere.
You're speaking of Caltrans.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, you can see it right out. I got pictures that showed you the whole stretch from the north end of the airport, where the water drains from the farm area underneath the highway, where the flood was on the highway, where it drains under and then out towards the harbor. It's all filled up. It's all filled up with sediment. If that was cleared and maintained, then that never would have happened, in my opinion.
Okay.
So anyway, I think more pressure should be on, again, all the DPW's drainage system. I'm sure that they had some problems, but at least where I saw, their drainage systems were, unless there was some freak thing with leaves filling up, I saw them chasing around and doing their work. DPW's pipes go to the Caltrans pipes, and those Caltrans pipes are not flowing good underneath the highway. Everything's going to back up. So I think that tension should be pushed more towards Caltrans. And on those pictures, everything you gave, everything is really a case by case. It needs to be analyzed case by case. And I do want to caution some of these areas that you seem like you're suggesting, I mean, there could be, terrific assessment charges for property owners to do. I'm not exactly sure where we're pushing for this 1,000-year storm drainage system, but I mean, money's got to come from somewhere. There'll be a lot of ramifications that we may not, unintended consequences. I think we should focus on Caltrans and what Melinda has brought as far as the natural drainage systems.
Thanks, Dan. Any other council members wish to comment? Go ahead, Ann.
Thanks. So let's see, where do you start? There's a lot of issues that still have to be answered. And I do think there's something in construction that if we allow all of these huge projects to go through, it requires a lot of parking lots, impermeable surfaces. And it certainly does add to an issue that we all know exists. And so I think if we could try somehow to require smaller development until we can address these larger issues. Also, I don't know what happened to the $1 trillion infrastructure bill that got passed and where all the money is, but I would like to see some of it, and we have an issue that we could be asking for, we go in, and if we can set certain projects, perhaps we can just go in and start asking for money for at least where we know we have the greatest need. And so, I do see a benefit to at least addressing some of the issues, especially coming out of the hillsides. And I know, like for me, I'm out of my house because I got flooded, because we're talking about Sierra Street. Well, they did pave Sierra Street, but they did not put in the proper drainage. And so that's an issue. And it comes right down the hillside, and it came right into my home. And so, these things do need to be addressed, and we have to have proper runoff. And the other thing is, especially in my area, everything goes right into the ocean. That's our drain says. It says right on it, on the little cover, this is going to the ocean, which is probably like most neighborhoods. Well, that goes into Fitzgerald Marine Reserve, and that's a protected area. And so just imagine what all is being emptied in there. So this needs to be addressed. And if we have to be assessed on our property, so be it. I'd rather have that than see us get flooded out. And look at all the other assessments we get to pay for. We're being assessed all the time to pay for all these housing initiatives for the county. Well, what about the people who live here? All the rest of us that own property, it would be nice to be able to maintain our property and stay in our homes and not be flooded out. So, I think it's a small price to pay if we do have to have an assessment, depending on what it is, first start asking for the monies from higher ups and then kind of go on down. But we can't just say, oh, it costs money, we're just not going to do anything, and these builders need to pay their fair share. And so, anyway.
I think Gus, you raised your hand.
Yeah.
First, I just wanted to say that was a lot of work that went into that thing. That was an impressive presentation. Appreciated the logical flow of it. It builds to a crescendo of like, don't build anything new until you fix the current problem, which I think is a very logical answer. But to sort of build on a point I think Carl was alluding to, the basic political dynamic of the county is you've got Sacramento saying, build, 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 build. And then you've got us saying, okay, if you build any more, you're kind of screwing us. And with those two pressures from either end, we're going to lose to Sacramento every time. We just need to understand we will lose every time if that's, as long as that is the political dynamic. So the thing I actually appreciated most about your presentation was the idea of escalation, which I wouldn't necessarily, I don't know if I would use that word, but we need allies. We need to sort of change the political dynamic. And there's only really two ways to do that. One is to change the dynamic within Sacramento, which I have a personal vested interest in that particular strategy. But the other is to gain some more allies so we can even the scales a little bit. So I'm very interested in kind of exploring some of those ideas of how we get some more allies on our side within other areas, potentially within the state. So thank you.
Okay, other comments, Scott?
So I just, Lisa mentioned this when she was speaking just a little bit ago, that new construction has to be responsible for capturing the water that comes down onto the property. It comes off your roof, etc. You can't send it out into the street or somewhere else. You're responsible for that water. Now, Now, I hope that the Cypress Point project in Montera is capturing the water from their parking lots and from their roofs, so it doesn't add to the runoff. And I would love to know if that issue has been addressed with their building plan. So that, I mean, that's an easy place to start. Make sure that they're doing what everybody else has to do. That's it.
Other comments, questions? Nobody? Kimberly?
This is a little overwhelming and I'm still processing a lot of it, but I think what I'm trying to get my head around is what role the MCC has here and what are the things that we start with that are actionable. So one thing that stuck out at me is that DPW position that you mentioned. You know, that seems like a low-hanging fruit item. I'm assuming that the thing that keeps that from being filled is money. So maybe there's a way that we can figure out to solve that. Question about who would create the stormwater management plan. You didn't really answer that.
I spoke to some professional engineering firms, and my suggestion would be that we retain one of them who has done it before.
When you say we, you mean MCC?
We would request that the county retain a professional engineering firm to do a stormwater master plan, at least for the Midcoast.
Okay, so that's two different kinds of requests, dependent requests. Yeah, I think I need to sit with this a little. I've seen a lot of comments pop up in the chat, and I wonder if you could share those with all of us after this meeting. So
we do share the chat log, and I'd be glad to. They include things like put a toll booth on the top of Highway 92, as well as endorsements of the natural vegetation retention approach and so forth. But sure, we will publish the chat list.
I guess what I'd like to do is boil this down into what are first steps the MCC can take that are easy for us to achieve? Because this seems like years long, like several years long process of things to work on.
Okay. Claire, did you want to make any comments? Or you? Okay. So I see we have the public raising their hands, even though we sort of closed public comment. But being an inclusive kind of guy, I will ask Sid Young and Burnett to make final comments so we could move on to making a decision.
Thanks,
Go
Greg. I did forget to say one thing when I had my chance, and that is I definitely think writing letters to the grand jury requesting them to look into our stormwater issues, because I did it once years and years ago for the Harbor District when they were banning videographers from, taping their meetings. And to me, that just didn't seem right. And so I wrote a letter, and sure enough, they had came out with a scathing report that year about the harbor commissioners. It was quite a while ago, but I don't want county government to get a scathing report, but they do have to answer to what the grand jury comes up with. So that's one thing. Another thing is back when there was some grant money, they didn't apply for any through the State Water Control Board. So we missed out. I mean, if they applied for it, they gave it to the cities on the other side of the hill. So we should keep our eyes peeled for when there's infrastructure money for stormwater, but I'm pretty sure it ran out. The last thing was just to answer Scott's question. I went to the design review committee meeting for Midpen, and I suggested they put in pervious parking lots and paved areas should all be pervious, and they kind of poo-pooed that idea, I guess, because they want it to last long time. Of course, that creates a lot more runoff. But, I was just one voice. Talk to you later. Thank you.
Okay. Burnett, you want to make a comment?
Yeah, just a quick comment. I can understand that trying to identify the things that the MCC can do, the low hanging fruit and so on. But I think that we need to keep in mind that the purpose of, my understanding of the purpose of the developing this was to add to the CRISP program that Supervisor Mueller wants to put forward. And we need to keep in mind how to structure the report for that purpose as well.
Good comment. Claire, you have your hand raised.
Yes, I actually do have something to say. I was thinking about what Lisa said about what Pillar Ridge and Ocean Colony have in common is that they fund their systems as a community. And then we were talking about Second Avenue in Montera, which apparently people did not want to fund. And actually, in my case, in Moss Beach, we were asked if we wanted to fund moving the sewer pipe away from the bluff and go down the middle of the street. And we said no. I just don't think that's a good model. I think it's worked for Pillar Ridge and for Ocean Colony, but we should have had that sewer pipe, in my case, moved away from the bluff and onto the street. And the fact that the neighbors didn't want to pay for it doesn't mean that it shouldn't have been done. So I think that the model of do the neighbors agree that they want to pay for something to be done should be superseded by the general public good. And if it means raising taxes or something, that should be done. But each neighborhood shouldn't be able to say, no, we don't want this improvement. It's for the good of the community.
Sewer pipe or storm drain pipe?
Sewer pipe.
Sewer pipe. If I could just throw in one
That's
thing.
different from.
I'm guessing that Ocean Colony and Pillar Ridge are somewhat more isolated from other development and watersheds and are in control of their own destiny. Whereas people downhill, like you are, of everybody else upstream, and the people on Second Street, I showed you the gully on East and Third, right? The people on Second Street are downhill of a whole bunch of other people making decisions about impermeable surfaces. So charging them for the accumulated watershed of everybody upstream, that sort of bothers me. Kimberly?
So that, can I finish?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm not just saying that. I'm also saying that if something is really needed, like it is a sewer pipe along my bluff, if that flow breaks and falls into the ocean, that's just not our problem. That's everybody's problem. And everybody should pay for doing whatever needs to be done.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Kimberly?
Yeah, that was kind of what I was going to say, that's also subject to, CDPs and other permitting approvals, things like that to improve those things. And I don't think that a community should bear that burden.
Okay.
One quick comment, there were several things about impermeable surfaces. And what I've noticed over the years is that every time the county or county parks especially agrees to include impermeable surfaces into their plans, once the plan is approved, they end up changing it somewhere along the way, and they do away with the impermeable surface that they promised. And so, a way to hold them accountable for that so that they aren't able to do that would also be helpful.
I think you meant permeable, not impermeable.
No, I think she's right. She meant they change it to impermeable when it should have been permeable. That's what she's saying.
She said it the other way.
Oh, I think Sid's right.
All right. So now, since I did a lot of the talking early on, so I'm not going to try and respond to every comment. What I would like to see is a subgroup do kind of a combination of what Dan and Kimberly and Gus were talking about. Let's focus on getting specific, reasonable asks in a letter. So who wants to work with me on a subcommittee to do that? That's my question. To put together some kind of a letter that we would. Gus is one, Ann is the other. Okay. So by the next meeting, hopefully we'll have talked and we'll have a letter that is not necessarily everything Greg Diegues thinks ought to happen, but is a couple of pointed things that are reasonable asks, and we'll bring it back to the council for consideration. Okay. All right. I think that's it for this agenda topic. And my computer crashed here, but it's time now for council activity. Oh, no, excuse me. The minutes were pulled. Kimberly, the floor is yours.
I'd rather not waste time just going through them line by line, but I saw several things that seemed to me to be incorrect. So I'd like the minutes to be revised and resubmitted.
Okay, and you're volunteering to help?
Sure, I'm happy to help.
All right, we'll just do it like we did it before. Set up a time, we'll fix it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Council activity. Let's go around the table, starting with Dan, and then we'll come around. Dan, you have anything to mention on council activity?
No.
Okay, Scott.
So one of your agenda items here on the consent agenda, letter requesting county report on Midcoast flow of funds. So I've been trying to get that also, and I resigned to try to just go by property to property and find out what taxes they're paying. So just have to do it manually for the outflow. So that's what I was trying to do. But if you can write a letter saying, having someone just give us a report, that would be great.
We just wrote that letter.
Okay. Like I said, I was going to do that just manually, property by property, to try to figure out.
I was hoping Sid Young would do it for us as a real estate agent.
No way. There's too many properties.
Right.
They could probably give that to you from the assessor's office if they will.
All right. We do have a council member activity report from Len Erickson because he's the volunteer coordinator for the transportation work group. So Len, when you're ready, if you want to speak to the transportation work you've been doing.
Sure. Just a couple of quick updates here. We have coming up as we go through the summer into the fall, two major requests for coastline development permits that will come, one from Caltrans, another from GCSD, and we expect a third to come up. I've also stayed in touch with Caltrans with respect to the request to get information on the geotech report and the damage there. While I've been told that they have a report and that they have planned a maintenance project, I have not yet succeeded in getting either that report or an agreement that they would come and describe that project to us. So I'm working on that. They also are basically
Do you need a letter from the MCC strengthening your request?
No, it's not strengthening. I just need to know exactly where it goes to. So I would, if they haven't, agreed on that in principle, then we'd request a letter. And then as far as the CDP work, we're beginning to get both Gus and Kimberly involved in particular projects that are coming up now. So I'd expect them to be in a position to report back on that at the next meeting.
Okay.
We also have a lack of anything going forward for phase 2 of the multimodal or East Side Trail. So I'm working on a best way to bring that forward. The county, although it was a high priority in the Connected Coast side, they haven't funded any work or show any indication to move on that yet. So looking to take that up further. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Len. Claire?
Question for Len?
Question for Len from Claire.
I think you said that there were major CDP applications coming up from a couple of agencies. What was that regarding?
One is for the development of what they call the multi-asset improvement project on Highway 1 that will go through all of Miramar and El Granada up to the airport. That's a major project and it has to have a CDP for it. And they're in the process of submitting that. The other one is GCSD has hired a project manager for their work on a community center and a community park. And the estimates there that would probably be coming forward toward the end of the year. But I think we can begin to have some active discussions with the project manager to get further information.
Okay. Sid, did you have a question for
I'm
Len?
sorry, it's Michelle.
Question for Len.
There was
Oh.
a third. There
Well,
was
let's
a
go,
third.
Michelle Dragony. We haven't heard from you yet, Michelle. Go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just, before you guys moved on, Len, you mentioned 1, 2, and 3. What was the third CDP?
The third one is actually not a CDP. And this, basically in Moss Beach, there's a project to basically study and begin to prepare a document that is a stepping stone for further work. And that project has consultants on it. So we're looking for them to come to make a presentation to the MCC about that.
Is it a trail project? What kind of project is it?
No, it's an overhaul for the road itself, to really deal with, especially with the intersections and some sections of a parallel multimodal trail in that area as well.
Okay, Sid, you had a
Will we
question.
look at
for Len?
roundabouts?
I got a question.
That was my question too. Go ahead. You shouted out. I have my hand raised, but you go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I got a little excited. I just wanted to follow up. Would that be roundabouts, Len, that they might be including in that
No, they
plan?
look at the intersections. The roundabouts are one of the possible recommendations coming forward.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Sorry.
So basically, that was my question: is when do we hope to see a plan on the entire Moss Beach corridor, which they've been studying for a year now?
If you go to the website, and,
Which
look
MCC
at the
website?
The MCC website, look at the Moss Beach corridor.
Mhm.
There's a fairly extensive write-up that should answer that question. And the bottom line in terms of shovel complete highway changes there, probably not till the end of the decade.
Oh, no, I said, when is the plan going to be presented?
Well, it's in steps. It's in steps. And so I suggest reading that page to understand the steps. What we're talking about is the first step.
I think they told us it would be this fall sometime.
We have other council member activity. Kimberly, did you raise your hand?
No, I don't have anything.
And
The Board of Supervisors approved the off-leash dog program at Quarry Park. And also at Memorial Park, they're going to allow dogs to camp with their owners. And so they're not going to have access to Pescadero Creek. There'll be areas for the dogs, but they are becoming more dog friendly. And I think there might be a small fee that they'll include for people coming with dogs to cover any costs.
So where was the first off leash one at?
The Quarry Park.
okay, yeah, okay. Gus, anything?
I was just going to ask, I saw that email today about making a request about when we're going to get a plan on the Surfers Beach thing. And there's a Dina person to ask, if somebody needs to do that, do you want me to do that?
Well, I think, Len, you can speak to that, but I believe Gus is the guy to handle that area, right? So the answer is yes,
Okay.
unless you hear otherwise. You can check with Len, but the answer is it's in your bailiwick.
Okay, sure. I'll do it.
This is Claire, council activity.
Yeah, I attended, I'm representing the MCC on the age-friendly coastside committee, and they are contributing rather heavily to the Coastside Opportunity Center in terms of providing services that would be accessible to or helpful to older citizens. Also, the Coastside Healthcare Committee, what we're actually seeing some progress in is bringing different healthcare providers like Kaiser in the county and Sutter together to talk about the needs of the coastside with the ultimate goal of at least having an urgent care center, hopefully enhanced care. It's all slow though.
Okay. So I'll wrap it up for myself and mention just, I think, two things. I was asked to speak at the press conference where Anna Eshoo announced the $1.46 billion national grant for community fiber in California. After that meeting, I was approached by staff members from the NTIA. I can't remember the name of that group, but it's the federal agency that handles this stuff. And I am going to have a meeting with the NTIA lady and Leo Gomez, who, wrote the telecommunications report. And she's going to explain the paths to funding the community fiber network that we're trying to get built. And she's going to try and get us a case manager from the state of California, which is the really most helpful thing we could get. Somebody who can hold our hand and guide us through, because there are dozens of grants already being filed by agencies throughout, and we're just sitting here. Today, for the first time, I heard from a Half Moon Bay employee who's going to be assigned to provide some administrative support to help Half Moon Bay work with us, because we're going to try and file a grant jointly. I had approached Pescadero because in my mind, they're an underserved community back in April, never heard anything, wrote them again, thanks to Michelle Dragany. It was late June, I think. And we had some dialogue with them. Leo showed one of their members our report and talked through it. We still couldn't get a letter of endorsement from them. They had some kind of discussion, and apparently it just wasn't enough of a priority. So we're going to send this letter as is without including Pescadero. And if Pescadero needs to join in later, somebody's going to have to ask for more money. But I mean, to me, it did make sense to do it together, but I can't speak to what their priorities are. So that's the telecommunications stuff. It's kind of simmering, and we can expect more work. And then let's see, what was the other thing that happened? Oh, Senator Berman's staff wanted to talk to me about wildfire, and it turned out what they really wanted to talk about was insurance. And so I talked to them about some of the work I'd done with the insurance coverage here with Harold Herman, gave them a copy of the report that is issued for our region and explained how the insurance companies use that. And I was asked to attend, and I did a webinar that Assemblyman Berman held, and the insurance commissioner spoke. And frankly, there are things he said that don't make sense. And he admitted in the call that he's more a politician than an actuary. But we do have insurance companies leaving the state of California, and I believe there's something wrong with the regulatory framework in California that is causing this. But I will write up questions to Berman's staff and get back to you. But along with the stormwater problem we have, the wildfire problem also poses a I don't know the word threat, a possibility, danger of us not being able to insure ourselves. So that, I think, is worth my background attention to try and get to the bottom of that. Okay, so that is it.
Hold on a second. Where did you speak at? You spoke at?
Well, I spoke in Pacifica, thanks to Mike at the Democratic Club before SU got there. I spoke at the teleconference, press conference that SU had with Ray. It was the assistant secretary who's in charge of the NTIA agency, and he's responsible for this $46 billion, I think it was, national bill. And I might be speaking at a press conference Ray is going to have upcoming, we'll see, on the Wiener bill about building more on the coast side. That remains to be seen. Okay, time for future agendas. And if you don't mind, I'm going to just bring this up. In addition to the follow-up on stormwater, we had some major damage on Montara Mountain, and I put together, it was an enormous PDF of the emails and stuff I got. I might have been 50, 80 pages. I don't know how long it was. I think we have to say something soon about the Montara Mountain situation. So I think it deserves an upcoming agenda topic, but we need people to do the spade work to decide what it is we're going to put in a letter or in a discussion. And as if I recall correctly, the two of you were on that.
We'll do it at the same time and fix the minutes.
Okay, well, the question is, when do you think you'll be ready with a cogent summary of the problem and a letter that the council can pass off to the county and the Department of Emergency Management?
Cogent summary is easy, I think, because correct me if I'm wrong, because I think you want to do that. But we were developing an action plan on who to talk to, and get more information on how it happened, and develop a plan so that it wouldn't happen again. I think that's what I had in my notes from our conversation. So if you just want a cogent summary.
Well, no, what I want is a presentation of your thoughts on what happened.
Okay.
Why, what should be changed, and what gets put in a letter. I'm looking for the
Who? It's
letter.
important to who?
The letter to the county to say, don't do this again, and here's what you should have done, and blah, blah, blah.
So we'll give you, because that is more complicated than that because of the people who own the various plots. of
Right,
land.
I heard.
So again, we'll come back and say, this is the plot of land that's affected. This is the person who's responsible for it. Let's go to them.
All right, so I'm not hearing a date for an agenda item. You can get back to me. You don't have to commit now.
Yeah.
I'm just punctuating
Yeah.
that this is an issue that I think needs to be actioned.
No, we take it very seriously and we have discussed it and we did outline some next steps. So we just need to complete the next steps.
All right. The other things we have in the future, we had the glycophosphate or whatever that Roundup thing is called, pesticide, that got delayed.
Glyphosate, I thought we scheduled for the last meeting in August.
Okay, you think it's on August 26th? Let the minutes show that August 26th, I'm supposed to have an agenda, and you've got somebody lined up to give the talk or the letter or whatever you want.
Well, we will have some experts come in to give some information.
And you want somebody from Parks there to respond or what? You tell me.
Let's
later.
talk about that at the next
Okay.
meeting and with more details.
All right, Cypress Point Housing Development. That was another council member activity thing. Some of us attended the session. I spoke there. That's where I made the comment about polishing the bell when the ship is sinking. I don't think we have anything immediately to do, but we have an idea that we're going to create some kind of a position on what we think ought to be the guidelines or ground rules for that. Harbor and shoreline issues, Kimberly, you had something in mind. It was delayed by lack of participation. So we'll just leave it with you. You don't have a date for that yet.
I'm trying to nail that down, but my guess is it's going to be maybe the first meeting in September.
Okay. And then as a background issue, we have wildfire management, which I don't know what to say about that. It's looking like it might be the same kind of thing as stormwater management, frankly. That would be a bigger research project. And then we have some follow-up to do on the stormwater issue. So that should be at the next meeting. Any other ideas? Am I missing?
I wrote down the word listening session next to future agendas for some reason during this meeting.
The Measure K. I'm sorry, the listening session.
The Measure K?
That's the Measure K. It's a Measure K listening session.
Do we want to change our meeting date so that we can attend the Measure K thing and have our meeting on a different day?
Or just later.
Well, we just got lectured on changing the times, so.
Changing the days is worse, right?
I don't know, as long as it's a Wednesday. Claire?
I think we should be in a position of asking for things on Measure K, which means to me, if we do change our meeting, it should be before the listening session so we can kind of get our asks together.
What do you
And
propose?
the
A meeting on August 2nd?
Move it up to the second.
Are you proposing that we meet on August 2nd instead of the 9th?
I was thinking like maybe the 7th, but
Oh, you mean on a Monday night?
not necessarily. I don't know when. I think that we should, if this meeting is worth anything, which I'm not clear that it is, then we should be there making a presentation of what we think the community needs on Measure K. And so we have to put that together before that meeting.
Mike, do you know if, when we attend that meeting on August 9th, we have to have everything we ever want ready to list, or are we just going to hear the procedure?
No one has given me an agenda, but no one has given me an agenda for the meeting, and I have not seen one. If you want, I will try to get out and find out how the meeting is going to be structured.
Well, that would be helpful because we apparently didn't get, I sent, before you were the liaison, Heather Wilson, I sent her a list of things that potentially could be asked for under Measure K to Ray as part of a much longer list. It included funding the community fiber network, which you've heard about. It included a stormwater management plan. It included other things. But if we have to get our ducks in a row and give a priority list, then we need to know if we need to do it before August 9th.
This is just, I have been told that there was another meeting over the Bayside, and it was with the nonprofits that actually like get funding, and it was steps on how to get funded and stuff. So I don't know whether it's an instruction to how to get money, or is there new parameters? I mean, it was a voter ballot measure, Measure K. So they are limited to what they can spend it according to whatever the code, whatever was stated in the voter's pamphlet.
Right.
So that's that's the parameters of the funding.
Well, are you going to attend that meeting?
Yeah, I'm going to be there.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
I have a key to the door.
then my request of you is to alert the council. Okay, but in particular, my understanding is that health and safety issues are part of it. And we have a couple of health and safety things between telecommunications and stormwater that we would like funding.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you know that, and we can make a more specific request.
And then,
And
he just mentioned earlier, emergency preparedness. And some of that overlaps. Because flooding, is an emergency. People are
right,
stuck in their homes, and also, so it kind of overlaps.
It does.
It's not that it's completely out. So I just
Claire?
put that in.
It sounds like what we need to know is, what is this meeting about? As you just said, Mike, is this a meeting that tells people how to apply? Or is this a meeting that sets priorities? It would make a big difference as to what we do about it if we knew what the meeting was about.
All right, I will try to find that out tomorrow, and I'll send an email out to all of you.
all right, that'd be great. And so
And can the meeting be rescheduled so it doesn't conflict with an MCC meeting?
We already
Is-
asked that.
We would.
Yeah, no, we can't, because this was all set up by some other department in the county.
So it's essentially, it's a meeting not for us.
It's a meeting that was set by the county, and they're just using our facility. Okay, and there's only two being held in the county. One was on Bayside and one here.
okay. All right, so we will react, but as things stand now, we're still going to have an MCC meeting on August 9th. And I'll alert all of you if that's going to change. Michelle Draggedy, your hand is up. Why is that?
I dropped the listening session post into the chat so you can get a better idea of what it's about. The survey that Mike referred to earlier is a little bit associated. They're just trying to ask how we want to, if we were to get Measure K funds, how would we spend them? So the meeting ends at 7:00, and my suggestion is so that you don't change your time and your date, like Dan would prefer, and I think it's really important, is you could just make sure that everybody can go at 5:30, but just have a quorum be back at 7:00, and other people can trickle in as they're schmoozing. That would be my idea.
All right,
'Cause it's
that's her
close.
suggestion. Okay.
Yeah, it's close.
Any other agenda thoughts? Hearing none. Motion to adjourn.
Yeah.
So moved.
Second.
Anybody object?
Any objections?
By
By acclamation.
acclamation, there we go. Thank you.
Okay.
Awesome.
Recording stopped.